Khorne here, and today I will be sharing with you the story as to why I hate the endgame crisis. Now, when the endgame crisis was first announced, I was thinking it would be similar to the Chaos Invasion in Warhammer 2. Not something I would enjoy, but also not something I would completely hate. Unless I was playing Dark Elves, because that was the worst kind of suffering Warhammer 2 had to offer. The first time I experienced the endgame crisis, I set it to around turn 40 at 200% intensity in a Belegar campaign, and I tried to make it thematic, so I put it to be greenskins. Every major greenskin faction at the time was alive, so they all spawned 8 endgame armies. However, a dozen or so turns after it spawned, I had mostly wiped out the crisis or was really close to doing so before I finished the campaign by turn 65. So it wasn't really as intense as I thought it would be, but I didn't mind it too much as it spawned armies for the enemies I was already facing and not in the middle of my territory. The next time I experienced the endgame crisis was in a Be'lakor campaign, and this time I didn't really put much effort into customizing it. I'm pretty sure I set it to happen before turn 100 at 200% intensity, and this time it was extremely annoying to deal with. It was the dwarf endgame crisis, and there were so many armies just coming at me from all sides, but none of them were ever going for my armies. Instead, they always went for my minor settlements, which I had no way of defending. I was never in any danger of losing my campaign, and I wasn't ever feeling under pressure by all of those armies, as the more battles I fought, the more income and souls I gained, but it just wasn't fun to deal with. At this point, I just stopped caring about the endgame crisis and left it at default in every new campaign I played. But seeing as to how I never played campaigns past turn 60, I never experienced it again. The third time I encountered the endgame crisis was after they added the ultimate endgame crisis, and being the maniac that I am, I immediately started a new campaign to experience it. Now, I set it to between turn 100 and 110 with 200% intensity. I set it so late as to have ample time to build up my empire and be able to have the resources to deal with the crisis. I was playing a Khorne campaign, and it was mostly over by that point, as I conquered most of the world, and when the crisis spawned, I wiped out almost all of it. There were some dwarf factions I hadn't known would spawn, so I lost a few settlements to them, but I killed almost all of the main dwarf factions, with Belegar managing to win against the force I set up for him. Killed almost all of the wood elves, killed the entirety of the Tomb King endgame crisis, killed Skosnik at Black Crag, which I found weird that he spawned there. And I believe I have disabled the Empire Count's crisis, as I am not at war with Vlad. The crisis triggered at turn 109, and in one turn I would say I killed more than 60 endgame armies in total. Most of those battles I was able to auto-resolve, so it didn't take me too much time to deal with it. Maybe a day in total, but I definitely started hating the crisis by this point, as it popped up in the middle of my territory and had me abandon the campaign completely because I didn't want to go back and deal with all of those dwarf armies I had missed and were about to start wreaking havoc in the middle of my territory. Even though I was starting to hate it, I wanted to give it another go, and this time I would be better prepared to kill every single army. So the final time I enabled the endgame crisis, it was again the ultimate endgame crisis. This time playing the Barrow Legion. I disabled the Vampire Count's crisis because, well, I was playing them, and by this point Skaven were present as an endgame crisis as well. One thing I didn't take into consideration was that there was an option that would have the crisis activate after achieving long campaign victory. So when I enabled it, I was expecting it to spawn between turn 100 and 110 again, but I achieved long campaign victory by turn 60 something and immediately got notified that it was going to trigger. Fortunately, I had a few turns of warning to prepare for it, and the campaign was going quite well, so I had the resources to deal with it. But I had to give it my all to annihilate these armies. Turn 69 of this campaign was the longest turn I have ever played in any Total War game. Vampire counts perform really badly in auto-resolve, so I had to fight every battle manually. Not to mention all of the battles I had to win, where I used the Black Pripyat and Wind of Death to kill entire armies. Battles lasted anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, constantly doing the same thing, fighting doomstack after bloody doomstack, and always suffering. After 3 days, I was finally able to end the turn. This time, killing quite a bit more than 80 armies, and I only lost 1 settlement, which I immediately reclaimed, all while using no exploits. This really was the most frustrating campaign I have ever played, simply because of the endgame crisis. The campaign started off really nice, and I had a lot of fun with it, but the crisis changed everything and made me want to abandon it so many times. So after I finished this campaign, I concluded that the endgame crisis serves no real purpose, doesn't present any bigger threat than just playing the campaign normally, but is instead infuriating to have to deal with it, and would be best enabled in the early game when you really wouldn't be able to deal with it without exploiting. Because if you enable it for later into your campaign, they will spawn in the middle of your territory out of thin air and attack all of your undefended regions. It just gives you no sense of satisfaction when dealing with them, nor relief that they are gone. Just a sense of regret that you even enabled it in the first place. All in all, I see no point in ever enabling the endgame crisis, and really would like to see it get some sort of overhaul in the future. Maybe so it doesn't spawn in the middle of your territory, nor out of thin air, but instead grows alongside the player. Both of these things would be nice. If you would like to hear my ideas on how I would make an endgame crisis, I will link the video in the description. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne squad fights as one.